Our meeting. The time is 12:59. What did I say? They're ready.
Thank you for kicking us off, and welcome back, everyone. We hope you had an enjoyable lunch.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for all being here. If you want anything else, like we said, there's water, snacks, help yourself, chips still. So throughout the day, feel free to just keep helping yourself. And we wanted to frame the afternoon, and I'm going to frame the idea of the direction we're heading in, and Dr. B, feel free to chime in as well, for how we're connecting the dots here. As you can see, we're going to head into objective design. And for board team members, we are going to lean on you all to come up with some ideas for what objectives could look like, sound like, and start to organize those ideas as a team. For cabinet team members, this is a chance for you all to hear ideas, jot down notes, ask questions, write them down, and be ready to share that with Dr. B relatively soon.
Monday.
There you go. We want to speak for you. So it's a chance to connect the dots between these two teams and different folks.
So all of you, I would encourage all of you to lean in on this, all right? This is a really great opportunity for you to really sit with a board who's actively brainstorming and thinking about how with those priority areas, and what we talked about prior to lunch, how they might consider looking at these, measuring them, thinking about outcomes. You should be actively doing the same thing based upon your work and what you do. So whether it's communication or strategy or operations or executive directors, you know, so the executive director as well as the academic services, you lean in from that principal's perspective of, if you think about retention goals, as I stated before when it first came up, when we think about recruitment and retention, usually most organizations immediately begin to think about HR, but it's not just HR's work. It really is an opportunity for everyone. So be leaning in, thinking about your world, start developing your own lists. Ken and I are organizing Monday a little bit for cabinet, a conversation around what did you hear, what works, so I always think of a SWOT analysis when I think of having that type of conversation. What are the strengths of what we heard? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities? And what are the threats? So that we can then help work towards those priority goals, but at the same time include, as we work for those, what our board is thinking and what their expectations of us are. So, and thank you for that opportunity.
Appreciate that, Dr. B. And just one other piece is, up to this point, we want to thank everyone for their participation, their energy, and just being here. I will say, one could argue this, and a lot of people know, objective design is arguably the hardest part. And we're about to jump into that work. So really just pushing ourselves this afternoon to really try to be creative, lean on each other for ideas, but just prefacing that this is tough work. And we're starting that process now, and it'll continue, like Dr. B said, almost directly after our time here today. And so to scaffold us into this, Justin and I have just a quick activity, and we're going to use the idea of Paseo circles. And so we want to just spark the afternoon, generating some ideas, starting some conversation, and cabinet team, feel free to also jot down notes for this section as well at your workstation. But we want you to create a molecule on your table. Now I will say for our board team to respond to our limited Post-it supply, I just want to use paper. Because we already need Post-its for later on in the afternoon. Up to you, though. Just starting to generate some ideas. What reasons throughout your career have kept you at a particular job? And some examples to spark some ideas. Could be flexibility in workplace. Could be your manager. You got a manager who supported and developed you throughout your time at that institution or organization. Those are just some reasons. But we'd love to just spark the conversation and give you all a minute to jot down some ideas. And then we'll just do a quick share up to see any themes coming up.
Just said a job. I didn't choose school board. I chose a second job.
It could be any job. This job, not a job.
Okay.
So as we are finishing jotting down some of the reasons we've stayed, just as a quick connection piece, the reason we wanted to spark with this question is, given the data we looked at in the morning, this priority that we revised somewhat, but recruiting, developing, retaining highly qualified teachers and staff is hugely important, as we all can tell across the district. So just starting to think about what has kept you in a job. And would love to hear from board members and Dr. B, just sharing out loud anything that you recommend.
The very first job I took, and so I was out of college, and the only thing a woman could get out of college at that time was a clerical job. I took a job with the people who were the most exciting to talk to when I interviewed. I loved and love learning on the job, professional and personal growth, and problem solving. So those are the things that have. Wow.
Yeah, workplace culture.
Yep.
Who you're working with on a day-to-day basis has a huge impact on whether or not you're staying there.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing.
For me, challenge. I like a challenge. That's always been something to strive for. Leadership, having strong leadership around. Engagement with whatever, other employees or other members or other areas. I've always liked the engagement with others. And uniqueness is another one, kind of uniqueness of whatever you're doing or the issue, so.
Thank you for sharing.
I have people, opportunities, security, challenging, flexible, so I could always be with my family, and ever changing. So nothing is ever, it's always something new.
Thank you.
This is not this job. Financial stability, benefits, family, challenging, flexibility, I'm good at it, and growth potential.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share? No need to share, it's just open space.
That's okay. I was a tennis professional, so I taught mostly tennis. But I like being my own boss. I had very little oversight. I prefer to be the leader. Very flexible. I got to interact with members and might be clients or customers for other people, but I really enjoyed being a people person. It was always fun. That was one of the huge things. I enjoyed going to work. And then finally, I got to teach other people how to play tennis. So the results of teaching was great.
And pursuing a passion
Yes.
seems evident there too. And then to your earlier point, the autonomy aspect, a lot of jobs you can't have full autonomy, but
Right.
is there a space to build some autonomy? Like you have some say in how you can approach your work. Yeah.
So a lot of things, I like to learn something new, people person. I love people, so I love the people who I work with too. I'm a realtor, so I love flexibility.
Thank you, Sharon. So with all of these, this is just to spark ideas, and the reason we focused on this question is, like we said, this is going to be a priority that we deep dive into, and so just using some of the sparks and the thinking that we just named, why we stayed at a job, could that be layered, any portions of it, into our upcoming objective creation and thinking about what's going to keep people here? So just a space for us to get started today, and we're going to jump into deeper details now. And so, like we said, the point of this afternoon is drafting key strategic objectives. And just to frame again, these are all just drafts. And Justin, Lauren, and myself will work with Dr. Savage, Dr. B, to make sure that we have an organized document for people to react to after our session today. But all ideas are welcome, and we'll lean on each other throughout the afternoon. Just some orientation. As we said, we've seen this a lot, but just to make sure we're moving our way down. And we are at our final component of our pyramid. We will not go further than this. As we mentioned earlier, members of the cabinet team and folks who are here, this will be initiative projects that we'll tackle at a later date. But this is our final point jumping down to objectives and KPIs for today. We've seen this slide in the morning, but we wanted to highlight where we are and just follow the same example so that there's some consistency in how we're talking about objectives and then how they're connected to both priorities and initiatives. So you can see we're right in the center, and objectives do have a metric that you can measure against. So the big difference now is we are thinking about something that we can measure. And that will then lead us to our initiatives and actions. Like we said, we'll be creating those at a later date. Any high-level questions about the framing here in this slide? We saw it in the morning, but any high-level questions about the example as well? And the difference between priorities and objectives and where we're heading? We'll reference this slide throughout the afternoon too to kind of be as a guidepost. So we'll go back to this as well. As Dr. B mentioned earlier today, the framework that we're going to use throughout our drafting of objectives is the SMART framework. And so we broke that out here. And when we're jumping into drafting objectives, and when you are working with your partner or working just individually, thinking about these 5 components, and are they included in your objective? And it's okay if you don't have all of them, but trying to push yourself to make sure that you can at least have most, if not all of these included. Specific, you can see the breakdown of what that means there. Measurable, we already talked about that, having a metric included. Achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So throughout our conversations this afternoon, as you're working with folks, you can use this as sort of the guide with giving folks feedback, asking questions in terms of making their objectives stronger so that it can be leveraged across the district. Any questions about the SMART framework? Want to do a quick example slash mental framing that could be potentially helpful. And in a few moments, we're going to start drafting. So we want to give you some details, and then Justin's going to let you know where you can go to find some more examples. But if you're getting stuck today, or if you're thinking, where do I get started in terms of writing objectives for these priorities or drafting them? One way to think about it is first start with, if this priority became true in the next 5 years, what would happen? Starting your list there and brainstorming that way. Then converting that to, like we said, a SMART goal in an objective format. But first starting with, let's think in 5 years. If this priority was true, we kind of started that actually before lunch a little bit, what would be true within the district? It's a good place to start if you get stuck today, or if you and your partner are looking for ideas to spark. In terms of how this is going to be structured, we have broken this into 3 different sections. And how this is going to work, I'm going to go over each section in detail, and then when we, be brief this at this point, but then when we get into each section, I'll frame who's going to be where and how we should be rotating. The first part is going to be ideating. So we want to give you the space to select any priority. So you can see across the room, we have the priorities that we drafted with Justin this morning, and we actually edited a few to reflect the changes we're thinking. This is where you're going to be able to post any objective that you want to add or be included underneath this priority. So that's this section. And you can pick and choose. If you want to focus just on this one, recruiting, developing, retaining highly qualified teachers, feel free. You can add all your posts to that one. If you are feeling ambitious today and you're like, I want to do all 7, also feel free. Up to you. But we're going to leave that space open, and we're going to start that in a few moments. Then for the affinity grouping part, we're going to ask team members to partner up with one other person, and you are going to head to one station. And what you're going to do is just analyze what's there and start to potentially affinity group any themes or commonalities you're seeing between objectives. Just trying to condense it. Let's say we have 10 Post-its, trying to condense maybe to 6, if it's possible. And so you'll work with a partner to organize it at your workstation. Then I'll frame how we're going to prioritize once we get to it, but we will go through a prioritization protocol to help organize, okay, here are our objectives that we affinity grouped. Let's say we have 5. How can we prioritize these objectives and just organize them in a way to make sense of them?
When we're ideating, we're going to span all 7. When we get into prioritization, affinity grouping and then prioritizing, we're going to focus on 4, so the board is gonna focus on 4. That's really just in the interest of time, and that's part of the reason why we did the shorter survey before. But that's very important, and like, we asked that the cabinet, please, like, we need your help in this, because we're not gonna be able to get to prioritizing every single objectives for every single priority today. We're gonna do our best. But we also, it's gonna be, your responsibility, right, and the work that you're doing moving forward. So just wanted to make that distinction, because we don't think we're gonna have time to, again, do like prioritization by ease and impact for all 7. So we're starting ideating, yes, generating for all 7. By step 2, narrowing the focus.
That Justin. Last piece of framing is we like to ground our thinking in the concept of design thinking, and one part that we want to highlight, especially this ideating part where we're going to have people just generating ideas, that is this divergent thinking aspect. And so you can see here, the first thing we want to do is just consider all solutions. So board team, Dr. B, really try to push yourself to just generate ideas and know that it's a safe space. Then when we get into that affinity grouping, that's where we want to move to this conversion stage, where we're taking ideas saying, oh, this one seems like this one up here, let's combine them together. Or wait, this one and these 3 could all be lumped into one objective. So then we'll move into this convergent thinking model. A lot of teams jump right into convergent. So push yourself, especially in the ideation part, just generate ideas and try to get as many out there as possible so we can then converge. In terms of the priorities, this is the updated list that we created this morning. And this is going to be the 7 that we're focused in on. And so as you can see, the 7 here match what's around the room. And that those are,
I have that staff. I had it, deleted it by accident.
true. That is on the, which one? Where is it? It is here. Yep, staff is up there. So that's the one other addition.
They just have, safety is they put at the top as a separate one.
Oh, okay.
Where?
The very top,
Very top.
maintaining safe learning.
Oh, safe learning.
Yeah, this is
So
the
it's
one we
separate.
added. We didn't have a clear definition yet, but we can work towards that, but we did want to include it up here.
Yeah, we had 6 and we went back to 7.
Any other questions about the 7 priorities we're going to be working with? In terms of if you're thinking to yourself, okay, Justin, Chris, this is great, but how do I get started with writing objectives? Like, there's a lot to go over here. I'm going to pass it over to Justin. We have resources for you to help you get started. We're going to frame each resource and give you a chance to check it out, but Justin, if you want to frame those.
The first way is work that you already did, which is these envisioning Post-its that you added here. We'll leave them here. Come grab these, right? Some of them are written more like objectives, some of them are more aspirational narrative, but can be easily like the jumping off point for objectives. So for example, when we start to see increase of former students come back to work and be a member of this community, what might metrics look like against that, right? So that's one source of inspiration. The other would be, we have the packets. So the other would be, if you look at, let me get out of this for a second. In the auxiliary data slides, the bit.ly is here, there's a bank of sample objectives for 4 of the priority areas. So recruiting and retaining staff, on instruction, on equitable learning environments, on preparing students for success after graduation. So there's a bank of sample objectives, anonymized, like those are just ones that we pulled as examples to use as a jumping off point. The second to last thing here is the Jamboards. So, and I'm just, we're just opening up all your potential avenues here, right? So on the Jamboards, you have them by elementary, middle, high school. You already had access to them. Looking through these, it might give you some insight into a particular priority area. It might be a smaller grain size, it might be much broader, but it could give you some, some thinking or something to inspire what an objective might be. So know that these are here, right? And then finally, Chris has them. We do have, if helpful, we have and you want to pull from them in the spirit of refreshing, the current objectives for the current strategic plan, again, as a jumping off point. You can change them, you can revise them, but the reason we're giving these different areas to draw from is really just as a jumping off point to structure, start your sentence, almost think about it as a sentence starter in a way or a frame, okay? Because we want to be as generative as we can. So know that you have these different resources to help inform drafting objectives. And again, the Jamboards are linked in the auxiliary data slides. The sample objectives bank also in the auxiliary data slides, which is right here. Those are all towards the end.
So what we want to do now is give you all the space to jump into that thinking. And on Post-its at the table, our ask is that each objective, let's say, for example, you want to focus on this priority. Each objective you write is one Post-it. That way, when we affinity group and then move to our next part, we can move things around. And like we said, you have the agency to pick one priority if you want to focus in on that. You also can pick all 7. You can pick a subset of 2 or 3. Totally up to you. But we want to give you the space to just draft, and then we're going to jump into some discussion and partner work to organize the ideas that we can generate. Any high-level questions from the group in terms of this first part of our activity? And cabinet team, feel free to also take part in this activity, to jot down some ideas, and then we'll have the chance to also walk around and take a look at the ideas we're generating.
Could you pull that up though, so that,
Yes.
so we can see those 7, please?
Yep. These ones? This slide?
Yeah, because that way we don't have to look around there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just to spark some ideas as well, I'll leave these up here for a moment. These are just objectives that we pulled from different strategic plans. Some of them are really strong, some of them not so much. We look through the lens of the SMART goal, but just some ideas. This is related to retaining a highly qualified teacher, which will be falling under this one. If you're thinking about engaging students in classroom instruction, same thing. Here's an objectives bank. We pulled some, just to spark ideas, if you're thinking about the engaging students in classroom instruction, another resource.
Dr. Grenier. So when the Learning Lab, as I call it, was presented to us, and I brought up project-based learning. And they talked about another kind of learning that wasn't project-based, but expanded on project-based.
I can give them to them.
Do you remember what that was?
Oh, the bank?
They called it something different. It's okay.
I'll get it.
All right.
Were they talking about a mastery program? That students would progress based around mastery of the content? So
No.
that like, if I can demonstrate at the end of a semester, I can pass the EOC algebra final exam, why couldn't I move on into geometry?
No, that wasn't it,
That
but I
was
can
not
put
it.
that down also.
Yeah, that's something, yeah.
Mastery-based, yeah. That might have been it. Mastery-based learning could have been.
They might have had a different name for it. I'm not,
Okay. That's another one that I don't know if the state would permit us to do it, unless we're doing it in a learning lab environment.
virtual schools do it all the time.
Okay, that's true. Yeah.
So the state will allow us to do it, and Carnegie's about to blow the doors off the Carnegie unit this summer. They're gonna say that they've been wrong for 100 years.
You know, they were wrong, they were right at the time, wrong now.
Well, so they're gonna say they're wrong for the last 25, how's
Okay,
that?
that works.
But they should have adjusted with the times. Get a bigger picture of that in June when we go out to meet with them.
No, I got it over here. Oh, I got it. Yeah, just the two that we were over here. We do about 7 more minutes of idea generating. Keep gathering your Post-its, and then we'll move on to the next part of the process.
Do you want us putting the Post-its up?
Not yet, we'll do that all together in a moment. But yeah, if you want to label to help you organize where, what priority, yeah, just to be ready. I put them up here too, so it's easy to see.
Thank you.
We're just doing objectives right now.
Am I writing out too much?
No, I'm just saying, I'm not sure I am. Not
I know,
writing them out.
I'm confused.
Whatever it is.
Now you.
Just a couple of days.
Increase graduation where they know before a month out that they're not, that they have to take all this stuff. Do they know that?
Yes.
The kids, because I know right now they're trying to rush to get the kids.
No, we're rushing because we've got to do concordance course, so we can get them to take it again.
No, before, I know this last week, they've been all like hustling to make sure the kids are, like if they need math or whatever that looks like.
It needs to be hard.
Yeah.
System, which, and it starts in French.
I already know what they have to
Starts
make.
the first 9 weeks with an F in algebra 1. An F in algebra. That's the first 9 weeks. I am at risk to graduate.
So how do you work that?
It's a systemic monitoring process, which we're building, which would be really aligned. But that's one of the, that would be an initiative under 100% graduation. So it's ensuring.
So we have about
So you
2 minutes left to generate ideas. If you're ready, you can feel free to take your Post-its and put them on the affiliated priority. You don't need to worry about affinity grouping yet, just getting Post-its up there will be the first part. Once you get your Post-its up where they need to be, you can go ahead and head back to your seat. So if you're ready, feel free. If not, keep generating.
Just 4. Not much.
I'm allowed to do sarcastic ones, right?
Sure. Put a little smiley face with that. I think Alicia would come rescue him.
I did put the smiley face.
That's great.
Do we have 1 minute?
We'll come back and move to our next portion in a couple minutes. Feel free to add things to our paper, and then we'll jump into our next part.
I can't go.
She looked up there.
He's putting it back.
Oh.
I know, I'm kind of struggling with this one.
Here's our strategy.
They didn't say it
Double
had to be
check.
legal.
divergent thinking. Ideas about it.
Also
too.
making- And also making sure it's measured.
It is, however, only plan.
Yeah, it's a puzzle.
That's the problem. I'm like, well, this sounds good, but how do I measure it?
Oh, I just saw another one.
We'll have some discussions here in a moment. All right, we'll jump back in about a minute to move into our next piece.
I'm gonna have to bathroom.
I got in trouble if I put something else in there. Tired. It's food. It's food. Just drained down in my head.
I just asked my high school son a really stupid question. He has a dermatology appointment at 8:40. He said, "Do you want to go into school late, or do you want me to cancel the appointment?" Stupid question.
Say, can I,
It's a pretty
I
safe,
bet you what the answer will be?
it's a pretty safe question. Has a predictable response, I guess I'll say.
There is no such thing as scheduling an appointment outside of school hours for a high school kid with after-school activities.
Yeah,
It's not.
no.
It's not possible.
You want reminders.
As long as it's class, one of those assignments teachers versus,
I don't get that complaint out of that school.
Because safety had to be a separate thing all by itself. It's one thing up there for safety.
He's already taken
I think people show what they
his
can do. I
ACE
think that,
exams
that's,
for most of
that
his
could
classes, so
speak to the
he's
fact
kind of
that
bound to
people
be
dig
my.
He's got his one, look at him. He's got his one.
Wait, we're still writing. Hold on. We're, no, wait a minute, we have to wait.
We made its own category, we made its own category, but we only came up with one item.
We're sitting here, we're thinking still.
There's too many things.
it's in the shade.
There you go. That's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Good, that was good.
All right, everyone, we're gonna come back and move to our next part. So, number one, appreciate you jumping into that work. Like we said, that's not easy. And I heard from a lot of folks, you know, neurons were firing, we're trying to come up with this perfect objective, and we're gonna work together to create these objectives. And we just wanted to give you the space to jot down first, independently. Now we're gonna move to more of a collaborative space, and start to generate ideas and refine ideas this way. So, the first part of this process is gonna be affinity grouping. And I wanna frame how this is gonna look because we're about to stand up and move about the room and have some conversations. There are, and I think Justin labeled them, 4 priorities that we mentioned here that we're gonna focus on today. And the reason that we're gonna focus on these priorities first is because of community input. These came out as most urgent, most important, and your all survey that you took this morning, there was correlation across these 4 priorities. So for our affinity grouping practice, we're gonna focus on 4. The ones that we aren't gonna focus on, Justin, Lauren, and I, and members of the team will make sure that that is recognized in anything that comes forth from our time today. The 4 that we are gonna focus on are recruiting, developing, retaining highly qualified teachers and staff, 1. Engaging students in classroom instruction, 2. Preparing students for life after graduation, 3. And then all the way over there, ensuring equitable learning environments, 4. So those are the 4. In a moment, we're gonna ask you to stand. There are 8 of us here. We're gonna ask you to partner up with one person. Head to a workstation that we've identified, one of those 4. Now, if you're saying to yourself, Justin, Chris, I wanna talk about a lot of this, there is gonna be a chance to rotate. So even if you go to one station, you'll be able to rotate to another one towards the end of during the prioritized section. So you'll be able to go to 2 priority stations.
Right, and as we close out the drafting objectives part, we're gonna walk around and look at all of them together. So everyone's gonna talk about it and interface with every single, well, these 4, I should say.
And this method is just to maximize our time, put people together, get ideas, and then like Justin said, we'll go around the room to analyze, ask questions, and refine as well. So, trying to think, I think that's the framing. Any high-level questions from the group about the first part, our affinity grouping process, before we have you all stand and move to a station? Okay. When you get to your station, let's go ahead and move to stations first, and then I'll chunk the directions, so we'll move to the next part. Take a couple moments, move to a station, partner up with someone, and then we'll move to our next piece.
You want to go to recruiting?
Melissa? Sure. Okay.
There you go.
Or do you want to do?
Which one? Which one do you want to go?
Doesn't
Where
matter.
do you want to go?
Engaging students in classrooms.
You pick, we'll take whichever one you don't want.
Okay.
We'll just switch with y'all in a second.
Yeah, I was that guy.
All right, everyone, we got partners at stations. As you're reading, we want you to do two things. First is take a look at the ideas that are there, the objectives. If you want to add anything, grab your Post-its and add anything to that with your partner. The next piece, once you feel like you have a broad list, is to affinity group. Try to find commonalities. You can move Post-its around, you can group them, you can keep them separate, but go ahead and engage with that with your partner, and we'll come back.
I'm sorry, Chris. You said read, do this and then what, read it and then go to the next?
Yeah, basically, just focus here. Take a look. Is there anything missing?
Okay.
Do you want to add anything?
Okay, okay.
Then affinity group, that starts.
Okay.
So if there's anything missing, I got it.
Yeah, and use each other, because you were working independently, so use each other.
Let me see whether we're already done with these.
That's basically the same. Yep.
Students have ownership of their future. They have ownership of the team. What's missing to the team.
That was kind of like that.
Students want. It's like
These are all good. I think you can show them like quick one. I call that text. I think it's worth it because they might not think about it. Okay. But we don't, I don't think we need to.
This is another thing. So I brought letters this year, next year. Two schools. This team. High school, middle
All right.
You, all right. I used to say it. I was trying to we can see our kids. Problem. Sure, my training process that identifies at-risk to graduate at the freshman, sophomore, junior, senior years to get to 100%. So instead of waiting until 2 weeks before graduation, when we had our first graduation, in October. The first full completion of this is graduated. This first the second one. I didn't realize I was going to put my foot up.
They're still chatting.
Thanks. So that no one So here's another thing.
All right, everyone, we're gonna rotate to our next portion in about a minute. Also, the ones all right, everyone. If we could wrap up conversations, we're gonna do our next section here and jump into our first rotation. So for our groups that are at stations, we want to do one more rotation. And so for this prioritization part, we're going to have one group member who's currently at a station stay put. The reason why is we want to connect the conversation from what was happening. We want to make sure there's someone there to sort of continue the conversation. So between you and your partner, go ahead and align on who's going to stay. That other person, we're going to ask you to just move to a different workstation. So one person should remain where they originally were. One person should rotate.
Do anything any different? I'm still reading them.
The 8 of us are gonna walk around. So we started looking at all the Post-it-notes, we started to run the interest, culture of learning, their slide or pictures. So taking that might be a line to the not just I. This I really like.
But I think the line to make sure. Okay.
Engagement. This part is operational because.
And so just connect.
Here's what I can
Here's the other one. Sorry. No, you're right. What do we think? But if this teachers to students.
I agree. Right.
So you were a junior, you were a junior or you were junior, that's right. I would follow up. And our instructional team, including executive directors. In some cases, we came back and we got our kids so great, I would have kept the teacher. In other cases, we were like, my God, I have the best
The programming, yeah, our enrichment.
It's eye-opening, going in, people, I wouldn't have known that, I wouldn't have been very senior to their because I think the principals and people love our kids.
Your question was about what's going on.
Yeah, we're just
Like, any other, one thing that I would like to suggest is teacher-student relationships, student-student, because we've had very about research on that, and the degree to which students feel more comfortable with each other. There's a growing body of research around that being a predictor of achievement.
Yes.
You know, so, and yes, because in a small group, I feel more comfortable sharing my idea with you and I'm more judged. And because when the students are doing better and something's off with me, then they might say, actually, building something else because that. And yeah.
No, you're right, you're right.
Well, I think that there's the defined operationalized engagement. I think it's do we have the ability to see like what strong relationships look like? Giving each other like talk time. There's ways to
And then we talked about the teacher-student relationship, that will be a mixture of
that makes it that student is and what.
for example, successful learners, for instance, with measurement by assessment. Best method. Class evaluation. To know any help, this is what you get.
As opposed to like Justin, where they have.
As opposed to a robot call that comes out of our computerized system to say, you're treating yourself better. No, that's the way to happen. But to get Justin to come back, to get Justin for treatment to come back, he has to know he's
I would see that very differently.
Well, certainly our values in migration.
That's a potential. State really supports parents being involved, raising their children, just like elementary school. This is what I think they're missing. So the only thing I saw classroom.
You all get the A+.
Well, he got me, and I started on a relatively simple one, so. Here I am. Available?
When it makes sense, you guys. Board members. We're done adding just like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, but I got it.
They are prioritizing. Oh, he's like, that's totally fine. Totally fine. They would be glad because there's a board meeting tonight. So they'd be grateful for it.
So the structure of the whole board is, we don't, starting here, one spokesperson, just naming.
I think you should prime them to be fairly fair.
Just the person who's been here both rounds.
Yeah. Tell them.
See, for me, it's reaction. Your fault, by the way, harmonized.
I was like, I don't take any personal. I was like, Chris,
I was just thinking, if that's for me going into other people, I don't think there's like one mass. Define and operationalize.
Okay, so, yeah, we're gonna have to generate objectives. I'll add this to my list. Do I need to put some more meat on the bone for rates, safe learning environments, and operating systems? And then Ken, he's pulling together a document. It's a couple of other districts. Plans to review with his cabinet to give them a little bit. Kind of like an anchor paper, an ELA and ELA template, you know, deter greater liability type mentality, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's already doing it on his own, he's almost done.
Yeah, I know you said we'd get this done by Wednesday. Look, the rest of next Wednesday.
Oh, next Wednesday. No, Lauren.
Okay, all right.
Is on point for this. Cool. Yeah, you said you're booked.
Yeah, I mean, I can act.
I think, could she raised her hand immediately. So because she wanted to keep the time, so I'm like, great. But what I will ask of you though is to be.
Infrastructure is there, actually,
I'm not asking.
we're now, our
right.
veterans out east, really growing. Yeah, they are, I mean, that's true. We know we have, but none of them have the same thing, that's all. Yeah, I mean, I think just making sure that. Yeah. For some.
Not sure. It was an aha moment for me. Get to a point where you really have.
You need to go back?
Back to definitions. Thank you.
Definition of priority?
Yes.
There. Yep. Nope. There we go.
Done. So they really do.
All right. They have one more priority.
We do, that's where I really like this
No, they're gonna team
I know. It just, I think you just it's like the first statistical science. It's just, I don't care
Chairman, I have a serious question.
Okay.
As a tennis guy, how do you feel about pickleball?
Well, I played competitively until I lost my hamstring. Okay. Tennis. I think pickle. It's all reactive. It's a lot of fun.
Very hard.
And hard to pick up.
Because I know some more hardcore tennis enthusiasts there's a range of feelings about it.
Well, the younger ones that are embracing it, really embracing it.
Yeah.
The older ones that they would never embrace it, are now starting to embrace it. Accessible. Right? So close. We're like this close to each other. You should have.
Oh, that's true. It's a little more social.
It is much more social.
You usually have each group share, or do you keep it gallery walks?
I think a quick stroll first, kind of like a structure. Yeah. And then like usually they're bringing off points, a couple minutes per. Yeah. I'll take notes, Chris, while you.
All right, everyone, we're gonna come back for our final piece in about 30 seconds. If you wanna wrap up conversations, we're gonna move into our group gallery walk.
Thanks. What are we doing?
No, but she would. I get all. It's just very clear. I know how that vote would go.
It can be two members, but we'll just have prettier, if you just wanna frame like why things are in certain places.
Yeah. And I'll defer to my partner.
All right, everyone. So if I could have the board team and Dr. Bernier, we're gonna start over on this priority. So if we wanna head over this way.
So you can begin, Sam, with once we learned what Dr. Bernie wrote.
It's viable.
It's viable, it just doesn't look like viable.
And so, a couple of things we wanted to do here. This is just for not only this group to get a sense of what's on each board, cabinet team also get a sense, and also cabinet team questions came up. By all means, after we're done this, you can feel free to come up, take a look, and you'll have access to these as well. But for the group members that are not gonna go over what's on the board, just some questions to think about is really thinking about feedback in terms of that SMART lens. And so thinking, is this objective specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound? And just offering any insight or feedback, and we'll open up the space for questions, but that can be a lens that you think through. And so, my Ensuring Equitable Learning Environments group, feel free to take a few moments to think.
I mean, one thing I kind of, a lot of these, obviously, these are very high importance, but they're also very difficult. There's not a lot of ones that just seem like, hey, this is a quick fix we can do for that. That's kind of been a common theme, so. What, obviously, a big one we just talked about is ESE needs. It's a big one, I think, to ensure the equitable learning environment of this district.
Yes, you would.
ESE needs, sorry.
I'm
sorry, it's a big word. That is one, but obviously, again, that's a difficult one with staffing and recognition, things like those we're gonna talk about. We talked about certified media sessions for 2021, somebody put 100% of that, or 2031, excuse me, I can't read here, so. The difficulty with that is kind of getting the people trained for that, the availability of people for that, so, we're kind of generally gotten a bit, but there's a lot of people we have kind of in pipeliners that are available, so.
So very part of recruitment.
Yeah. Recruitment, professional development. Another, actually, one thing that we talked about, this thing, kind of ties all this, is leadership, how it is, again, in these buildings, whether it's the principal or whatever, how are these things defined? Like one of the things that came up is viable arts programs throughout the district. We kind of talked about how some of the different zones are in different programs, but I think it kind of still leads back to, it's obviously it's high importance, and I think where we have it, I don't want to say easy, but easier. But a lot of that, I think, again, depends on leadership, is a big thing of how that is portrayed within the school.
Yeah, because we identified that some zones have stronger, bring-in programs or drama programs versus other zones that do not have that, or they're not as strong as, ours.
But is that because of community involvement?
We think it's because of leadership, but as well, community is important, I would say. So, because sort of like North Myers Academy of the Arts has that foundation that gives a lot of money and support to that program, where I don't believe Veterans Park Academy has that.
And they don't. I mean, those are two very different school buildings just from socioeconomic status alone.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right? There are people who have chosen to go to North with the manner and means, which is why proximity didn't impact North the way North thought it would. Those people are in their minivans and they're coming to school next year.
Another one was opportunity for participation in trade schools. We kind of talked about different programs, about CNA throughout what we have.
Each zone. Do we
Each
have?
zone, yes.
So I get a lot of people say to me, we should have the same academies in every school, that all, CNA and all be the same in every school, so they don't have to drive an hour to a school or, far away. But I think that's, it's not, that's gonna be very difficult, it's costly.
It'll be difficult in some programs, but I think it's easier in others. Like, I think trying to find a certified welder that likes it, that's in South, trying to find one in the South, the East, and the West may be difficult. But CNA, we should be able to replicate a CNA program in multiple sites, at least minimal in the 3 zones.
So that was the question, we didn't think there was one in each zone.
Michael's speaking up behind.
There is a little top side.
He-
You had a sidebar, but I
Just broke the wall.
we do have that particular program.
Okay.
Is in 3 zones, but your point is taken. And they're viable? I'm sorry.
Why is it?
Sorry. You didn't ask that question. Little joke on the hand.
But to say the least, the opportunity should be in a zone versus a student having to travel
Correct.
out of zone to have the same opportunity.
And that was my thing about
Which is
Viable
bad.
Arts program. For me, that was, I think I wrote band, chorus, and art. It's a place to start. Every school building should be offering those 2 things. Strings programs, those might be more in each region, but not in every school. But we should have basic arts education in every single school building.
So, but trades, that, like I said, I've had people come to me because the need in the county is trade. So are we educating our students for our needs, specific needs in our county? I know that some schools.
We are.
do
We
that.
are, and we just came back from it, and it was COVID put off, correct? JA Inspire.
Yes.
Which was held down in Alico, and all of our local, every 8th grader in Collier and in Lee County had the opportunity to go to Alico and meet all the trades and all the different careers and interact with them over a series, 2 days. And what's happened is JA was really strategic. They invited people who weren't participating, and they invited them to the breakfast. And when they saw the layout, they're like, well, why aren't we here? And they said, that's a really good question. Why aren't you here? So that's going to continue to grow. Because we've got to expose our kids to the careers earlier. We can't wait till high school to expose them to what the career opportunities look like. So you're 100% correct.
I keep mentioning that's a big thing, elementary.
But you'll see that over there on that site.
That's what's important. Yeah. Pre-K and access in the zone, that's, I guess, more kind of the personnel part at this point, resources.
It's a personnel point and it's programming. So there's some of the things when like I didn't take your phone call first thing this morning, we were talking about pre-K and how we get pre-K to be K ready. And then think about, that's how we're gonna get to read by grade 3. We're gonna have to do something different pre-K through 2 than we've been doing, because we are not bringing readers into grade 3. We're just not.
Sorry, cut you off.
No, you're fine. We all are.
Development program for integrated ELL students and equitable learning, that's one that always keeps coming up. Obviously, it's difficult to find. We actually had a very good presentation on that in CSI, Dr. Sandra Combs, just a few months back, that kind of gave some perspective. So, and one thing I hope with this one is, can we look to other counties like House Collier, populations similar to us in many ways, but they're more successful with it. How do they do that? What's the difference with that? Equitable extracurricular activities and programs is important throughout all K-12 schools, but that should be the easier one to accomplish compared to the rest.
Anything you want to add that we missed?
I wonder and really like, so I'm gonna use, what I've liked is, I see alignment with some internal discussions that have been occurring when we think about our geographic regions. And that there would be equity and parity between those regions. That's where equity would start. Then we work from there down to individual schools. That changes the role of the executive director, right? That changes what they're monitoring. Right?
So
They're not
that
just
leadership
bringing,
then?
their focus is gonna be 100% on student achievement and learning, but their initial dialogue as they enter a building would be, so where are you with? Because we have to make a strategic plan to live off of these walls. And that means operationalizing it with our executive directors who do the monitoring in the schools. So these questions will see that. So this is in alignment with, this is really good stuff.
And we're already starting to see the connective tissue between these priorities come up multiple times. And I know some groups, light bulbs are going off. I do want to recognize the other 3. So we want to get to preparing students for life after graduation. But to that point, we want to offer up the space. Does anyone else want to offer anything related to our sentence starters here, or any other questions or feedback coming up for ensuring equitable learning environments and what's been presented?
Was there anything in there about measuring?
Well, only that it's in each zone,
Okay.
each school. I mean, it was mentioned,
Yeah.
every school, every zone. Those are, I think, the measurements in this particular.
I have difficulty coming up with measurements because I don't know what's achievable. From my seat, high view, I don't know what's achievable. So I put a lot of blank percentages in what I wrote.
I did a couple of extra sentences.
I think if you're at, I'm just gonna make up a number, if you're at 45% proficiency as a district in reading, to say that by 2030 we'll be at 100% is realistic. We have to look, because if we do that, then we got probably a whole nother set of problems that we're violating all sorts of laws. Everybody's got a number 2 pencil, and an eraser that's worn out. And that's what happened in Atlanta. The pressure raised so much on Atlanta, it was okay to change a couple of tests, but then the scores went up. So next year they had to change a couple more tests, and before you knew it, you had a major scandal in the city of Atlanta. We have to, as best we can as a cabinet, we'll have to increment out what we think is a reasonable expectation and come and test it with you. Test it with you as a board member and as a parent to say, these are good metrics, Dr. Bernier, we like them, or we'd like to see you stretch a little bit more here.
Understanding that high expectations is one of our values.
Correct.
Right.
How do we measure leadership?
Which complicates things,
Because it means, but in a good way, it means changing how we evaluate our school leaders. Because their evaluation does not revolve around some of the things we're talking about. So that's, we'll have to, there'll be an outgrowth of this, we'll put it that way. Sorry.
Yeah, and during this whole time, I know Justin's been doing this, we're capturing notes.
My plan.
Making sure that we're capturing what's happening here. And then like Dr. B said, conversation with the cabinet will be critical in terms of making sure the metrics are in a good place. Do want to turn to preparing students for life after graduation. So shifting gears, but you can already see the connection between as we go from one to the other. Would love to just hear a little bit about the group's work here, some objectives, maybe why some objectives were in some categories, and then we can offer some feedback.
Okay, so first is 100% of the students graduate, and they graduate with a plan to go into the workforce, like we said earlier, military or college. The second thing that I would say is measurable is grade level competency. And there are a couple of suggestions up here. Close the achievement gap for the 3 Rs for demographic groups in 3-year cohorts. And what that means is that you're looking at a child's progress over a period of 3 years. So if a child's been in the district for 3 years, we own that child's performance in year 3. Year 1, we own it, but we're not responsible for it. So looking at the data, looking at, are we making a difference within the district moving forward? And then, so mastery-based competency, progression K-12, cohort members are on grade level 3 for reading. 3-year cohorts are at level 3 or above in the core subjects. Students are proficient in math and English, the same as their, across the board and with their peers. Let's see. Increase industry certifications. The ones that I've mentioned before are really, I think they're not that difficult because they're really pretty much about aggregating the data and then looking at the data and seeing what it is you can do with the data. I don't know to what extent they may be, the teacher or staff availability may impact. Let's see, increase student proficiency rates, reading and math, industry certifications. I was starting to talk about certifications. That's hard. And increase associate, AS is associate science, AA is
Associate of Arts.
Those may be difficult, but those are all part of graduation. Let's see. We want to build a technical college in Lehigh, and we need to expand early childhood learning access programs and access. And there is something up here about soft skills, but we had trouble understanding the metric that was included with the soft skills note, so I don't know who wrote it. If they want to just say what the 85% is. Incorporate assessments of soft skills into every secondary class and
Monitor mastery until all students have an 80% or higher by graduation.
how do you measure soft skills?
The student walks into the classroom, are they dressed appropriately, are they prepared to learn that day, have they done their homework, do they raise their hand, it's just.
No, I know what they are, because we don't have a way to measure that right now. Yeah,
Exactly.
Part of that.
Yeah, we do measure it in our career classroom.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you walk into a welding classroom and before you even go to your station, you are assessed on 15 or 20 different things, and they're all soft skills.
I do know that, what's the for-profit college that got the grant from the state to develop a soft skills program for businesses, and then the district only had access by paying for it? Which school was that? Who remembers that? For-profit. Hodges. Got a grant from the state to do a soft skills development program, and then turned around and charged us, so we didn't. But anyway.
Learning for life has soft skills.
Huh?
Learning for life has soft skills.
Yeah, that's true.
In the classroom, and not everybody participates in learning for life.
But that's a rubric or an expectation that can be made for virtually everybody who does before and after school programs. Anyway, I think that pretty much, at a very high level, covers everything. Yep, up here.
Anyone from the group, questions, comments, related to preparing students for life after graduation?
I think it's all following suit.
Your progression. Like we said, we'll keep that up there. That'll be up there as well. We're gonna head over to our third priority. Dr. Bernier is gonna be the spokesperson.
Talk a little bit about engagement, students in classroom instruction. And we tried to land on Post-it notes. We still have a couple of lingering questions / things that we should consider. And one is about increasing that ability to get student voice so that we understand from a student's perspective whether they're engaged or not. And we also started looking, while some measurements are suggested, we should maybe take a deeper dive in how we can measure some of this. In terms of difficult with high impact, we want to connect instruction to student interest. That seems relatively simple, but with 100,000 kids and connecting them and setting potentially like their own individual education plan in play, that potentially is a significant amount of work, but we believe it would have high impact. Creating culture, that's why I always move to high and difficult, because when you're creating culture, we know that takes time. Culture of learning where students have ownership of their future, which will help with the gaps, which is where these two are sort of paired with each other. Then we talked about the importance of ongoing monitoring, mentoring, and intervention. So we talked a little bit in one of our walk-bys about, one of the at-risk things for a student not being able to graduate is first 8th grade proficiency. But the next thing is that first F in Algebra 1 in the first 9 weeks. So when a student fails the first 9 weeks of Algebra 1, huge red flag. And what are we doing at that point to monitor, mentor, and intervene? So how do we get that engagement done early and make sure that we're helping students engage not only in curriculum but engage within school? Defining and operationalizing engagement, we thought that was relatively easier. It was kind of middle of the road, and we think we could get a definition out like that. High impact but easy. In 3 years, by continued survey, students' classroom interest increases. So we could look at that metric we saw earlier today and see if we can get that 1.43 down to below 1. That would tell us that the students are more engaged with the teacher expectations and the student expectations are starting to come into line. It can be measured by assessment, tests, GPA, et cetera, school attendance, student survey of the teacher, exit survey results. Nobody threw 360s up, but I think maybe our teachers could benefit from an easy use 360, maybe their principals as well. We'll come back to that in a minute. We thought these were relatively easy that would have high impact. One was a day in the life of a student. Would never have done this the first year, but I think next year, the members who are sitting with me here today, if they're still here, we are going to experiment into what's called a day in the life of a student. So we would meet Ms. Giovanelli Jr. at North Fort Myers High School on the bus ramp, and I would follow her through her day. And we would be engaged, we would gauge engagement, all right? And you get a pretty quick feeling for what your schedule will look like that day and how engaged you were. There's great work going on with the executive directors and academic services regarding classroom walkthroughs. We look at engagement, we try to make the determination whether children are truly engaged or whether they're being ritually compliant. Meaning, there's a lot of times when the teacher's doing all the talking or an adult is doing all the talking, the kids are behaving,
but they're not engaged. We can't mistake not disrupting a class as engagement. So we think those are relatively easy. Creating a student school advisory council, again, that brings in that idea of student voice, where students produce 3 actionable recommendations, potentially look at some of the survey data and help the administrations of the schools better understand. And finally, we thought this was relatively easy, was 100% transparency on what's being taught in the classroom and making sure it aligns with the standards. Weekly newsletters, updates, invitations, we believe that's relatively easy to do, but it'll have some impact, but it wouldn't have as high an impact as, say, for instance, connecting content directly to student interest. That's what we were with student engagement.
Yeah, feel free from the group, share anything, comments, questions, feedback.
So as I was listening to you, it occurred to me that one way to engage older students is to mentor younger students and teach younger students. And the same way to engage younger students is to have students mentoring and tutoring as opposed to adults. I think you're the one who told me that that's what students mentoring.
Wasn't that up there?
It was, but I think it's more from the aspect of teachers and administrators doing the monitoring, mentoring, and intervening. But student mentoring is a very viable way
Some
to
schools
help.
do that.
Like almost a peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
And that's where things like Latinos in Action and other things come into the potential of initiatives that could help support student engagement.
And there was some alignment with, I don't know if you said it, I had to step out of the room, but competency-based learning, you mentioned that too, mastery. Why keep a kid in the classroom for a year if it takes them 3 months to learn the subject? And why kick a kid out within a year if it takes them a year and a half to learn it? Goes both ways.
It does.
I sort of got involved in something like that, forgot all about it. When I was a junior in high school, I actually taught a geometry class for 1 period because, they had 7 periods, so they had substituted to geometry for 6 periods. So they just had an adult in there, but they knew nothing about geometry. So I got to actually lead the class for 4 weeks.
There was something up here, I'm sorry if I didn't read it, but there was something up here that spoke to students also helping potentially to teach. So it's up here. I just don't know exactly where it lives on our post-it note, but it's up here. So that's a good.
But yeah, something like that, even I know sometimes with our teachers, maybe a student in there with an adult might actually do a better job of teaching the class than some adult that knows nothing about that class.
And the kids are hearing it differently too, you are.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, they really do speak in different language.
Yeah.
I mean, they really do, and you do need an interpreting could help. I'm serious, I know every generation does it, but this generation particularly.
Want to spend our last couple moments here on our last priority. However, well, it looks like we're going to shift anyway. Just thank you, Dr. Veneer, for going over it. And like we said, that's all there. That'll live there. Cabinet members, feel free to come up and take a look at the thoughts that Dr. Veneer shared. Last group, if you want to just share an overview of your thinking for recruiting, developing teachers and staff.
Well, I feel like we have kind of encompassed this throughout the room already to hear, because we have to have recruitment teachers to be able to do all these other things. So something measurable would be retention and employment. Obviously, there's data that can measure how many, what % are we losing each year? What % are we gaining each year? I'd love to see if teachers are they leaving our district to go to another district? Or are they leaving our district to change careers? Or are they leaving our district to retire, which I know that data exists, but that exit survey would be a great idea to, 3 months post-employment, if they wanted to fill that out, and we would read that. But we also talked about having some sort of a goal, be it by 2024, X amount % fully staffed, then 2025, we increase that percentage each year, hoping to get to an end goal of, say, like 2030 at maybe something attainable, like 95% fully staffed across the district. And then we were talking about how to keep those staff members. I know that they exist, the motivational surveys that sometimes corporate America sends out to their staff. I think that we were talking about what a great idea that would be for an administrator when they go to do that mid-year or that final evaluation. Just having that short little quick cheat sheet on who they're talking to, Mr. Bernier, let me see how, and we talking about the year, how they progress, but it says, Dr. Bernier is motivated by making impact and having fun in his classroom. So gear that towards that conversation so that there's more one-on-one, because I think we all talked about if they feel supported by the administrator, they are more likely to stay at that school. Teacher recruitment, we thought this was very important and probably on the easier end to make sure, because I think we already do this, is a one-stop processing of new teachers, like making that such an easy onboarding task for brand new teachers so they feel excited and they feel prepared the first day that their student walks in the classroom. Teachers feel administration has their back, especially with student behavior that was somewhere else, making sure that, and that's something I think that we probably already measure on how many disciplinary referrals are being given out, how many students are getting a disciplinary referral and coming back to the classroom that day, how many students are getting a discipline referral and then spending time in maybe another classroom or however that leadership's handling it. Making sure, I know that a lot of complaints with teachers are workload, you hear that a lot. It's not just money, but the workload, they feel burdened or bogged down by the amount of things that they have to get done in a day. So one of those is PLCs. I know that they love their planning period. Are their PLCs efficient and effective? Are they just having meetings to check a box that, hey, we're having our PLCs every day? And if it's not, and the teachers have a better way to use that time, then let's let them, because they know their classroom and their day-to-day activities better. Student counselors' workload, confined to jobs, that was the same thing. Recruiting students to come back here to teach in Lee County and ensure pathways for movement throughout the district that's healthy, meaning from, if you're transferring from one school to another school. But this kind of touched on, I think, what you just talked about and bringing kids, not just our students, but even former students. And, if we have, let's take South Fort Myers High School, for example, they have that amazing class with the welding and the things, all of those types of tech kind of things. If they're able to put that to use throughout their day and they're able to work on cars and things like that, why can't students who are interested in becoming educators, why can't we let them have a moment to put that to use, see if that's something that they really want to do. I think that's just preparing them for the future, if that's something they want to go into. And then consistent career path, incentives, that's kind of went right here. I think that's it. I think we hit them all, because so many already hit them before we got here, so.
One of the conferences I went to, their system had a program for teacher certification for high school kids. So when they got out, they could basically, I believe, were able to be at least a teacher's aide, if not a substitute. I wasn't real sure how that worked, but that was working real well, they said. And they were able to go on within 3 years and get their teaching certificate or something like that.
Was that not part of our Grow Your Own within our own district?
Yeah, I don't know about that program, how well that's going or how wide it is.
Because we had a kid from the south actually, who went through that, remember?
Yeah, but Grow Your Own was like a scholarship. It wasn't embedding it into the high school experience, which is, I think, the difference.
Right, but they owe, it's kind of like what they do over in the other countries when they send somebody over here to be educated, you owe them so many years of their life. And same with, that's what was taken. That's what it is. But that's what we were doing with some of the students. I think we had 2 or 3 of them that went on to FSW now, or Gulf Coast, and they were to come back here after those years to the teachers' school. I think it was 3 years. I can't remember, but I think that's what it was.
There's definitely an opportunity to improve the amount of effort we're placing in starting in elementary school and into middle. Refining our approach to having students choose to become educators, no question about it. Long-term in high school, it's going to be more along the lines of what are the scholarship opportunities, and then what are certain factors or manners and means through building community partnerships and other things for students to have reduced tuition or no tuition, but yet come back and have to work for us for a period of time. So I've seen successful programs built that way, magnets in education. But it really starts when that first third grader hugs you and says, I want to do what you do, you don't have money, I can see it. And we've talked about that in my teacher focus groups. I mean, you don't always tell students the complete truth. So you say, it's a great job. Because maybe that day it is. Tomorrow maybe not so much, but at least today. So yeah, I think we have to find a way to grow up.
When I was in elementary school, we had TOTS, Teachers of Tomorrow. And they were basically help the teachers. You know, I happen to know several of them went on to become teachers.
Teachers of Tomorrow, there's things like future educator programs. And then there's magnet programs where the colleges and universities can get involved. And throughout the junior and senior year, part of that is accelerating when you prepare students for life after graduation. One of the things we didn't catch that we should at least memorialize somehow is how do we accelerate middle school curriculum to free up the space in the high school schedule so the junior and senior year become more free for those ASAA, dual enrollment, potentially getting your foundations of ed and some of the other prerequisites out of the way. So now you're even cheaper to your parent when you decide to go to college because your components are out of the way.
For me on that one, it keeps going back to that presentation. I don't know anything to see that, I keep bringing it up, but he kept saying, it wasn't just teachers, he would have his students come back as staff, assistants, everything, kind of that, keep your culture, he kept that pipeline of coming back to his school throughout those generational aspects, so involving other people. So that was kind of what I was thinking.
Good stuff.
Well, I want to thank everyone for jumping into this process. And we can take our seats and we'll jump into our closing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rest our feet.
Getting so stiff. All right.
No, that's what, standing up, why am I?
Yeah.
All right. 2:47, great. All right, thank you all for leaning into that. We just want to recap the day, clarify next steps, and that is it for today. So in the morning, we took time to review and refine the strategic direction, so mission, vision, and values. Chris and I have been taking notes so we know our next steps there, which essentially is leave as is, but clarify what we mean by world-class, right? We thought through our different priority areas. Where we landed with our priority areas is we combined, and expanded and both combined, the recruit and retain highly qualified teachers to include staff, right? We also added a priority around safety. So again, it's on the Ed Elements team to begin fleshing that out as a starting point, of course, to share with the cabinet to run with. And we made a lot of progress on priorities. So we had some deep discussion around the priority areas. We also took time to look at student and educator data, alignment and discrepancies. So know that was a part of our experience today. We just closed with drafting objectives aligned to priority areas. So we will, when I'm done here, I'm gonna take pictures of everything. I'll make sure that's shared with all of you, so you have that. I'll make sure to zoom in so you can see it. And that is going to inform refining these objectives, right? So we really did work through all of our objectives for today, and we appreciate your focus and your energy. In terms of next steps, I mean, this is really it, right? Like very broad, so let me unpack that, okay? So what we'll do is we, Chris, my colleague Lauren and I, the Elements team, we're going to really go through our notes, go through the input on these different posters, consolidate it into a document so that it can be shared back with the group, right? We'll share it with Dr. Savage, Dr. Bernier, Mr. Ramirez to make sure we get like the initial kind of feedback. I know, Dr. Savage, you're going to be working individually with each of the cabinet members, and of course, having the board react to it, as well as some of the groups that we engaged earlier in the process. So once it goes through some initial review, we want them to look at it as well, give us feedback. But we'll be working quickly and furiously to get a draft together of the refresh plan as soon as we can. So that's really our charge over the next week, essentially. 8 days, so we want to get something in place as soon as we can. Any questions about next steps, what we're doing with your input from today and our discussion, or any questions about next steps? Okay. Then with that, I just want to take the time to thank each of you again for being here and leaning in. I know not every day you're spending 6 hours talking through priorities and objectives, but this is important work in setting the future, right, and refreshing what that future is going to look like. And Dr. Bernier, I think you said something to the effect of we got to take these ideas off the wall and bring them to life and make them happen. And that's what we're positioned to do next. Because of your input, because of cabinet members' input, a number of people across the district and community. So I'd invite you to respond to the simple survey. Really, it's feedback for my team and I so that we can make improvements. But if there's anything related to the plan that you want us to be thinking about or considering as we're putting that draft of the refresh plan together, please, of course, let us know. We take that very seriously. And with that, Dr. Bernier, I don't know if you have any closing remarks, but I
do.
I would like to turn it over to you.
And one of the things the board and my team are always aware of, I always have something that I want to say. First of all, is to say thank you. It's 6 hours well spent and a great deal of effort going in, and it may appear to the community that may be watching in, or some of the community members that joined us today, that it's still a work in progress. It is, right? But there's enough now for us to work from vision and mission to priorities in the beginning of the definition of some objectives, to then shift the work to us. And now I'll let us determine what those objectives are to meet those priorities. Then we can look at our initiatives and our KPIs, how we're going to measure them. I will tell the board that what I will encourage the cabinet to do is, and this occurs a lot in school buildings, anybody who's ever been involved with a school advisory council, every year they write a school improvement plan. And every year we tend to add, and we add, and we add. And sooner or later the plate becomes a trough, and then the trough becomes a bowl, and then the bowl gets sides. And because we just put more onto the plate and it can't stay on the plate because it's going to fall off. So we have to be also very cognizant of what we're doing already to meet some of these priorities, and is it working? If it's not working because it's not the right thing, then we need to have the permission to discuss that openly and potentially remove it. The other option is to have that discussion and have some discussion about whether we're doing it with fidelity. Because if it's a fidelity issue, then if we improve the fidelity, it may work. So we have to make sure, and what I'll encourage them to do is come back with a comprehensive plan that we now can show our work to meet your expectations. And at the same time, make sure it's actually actionable. I like the word doable, but I'm not sure doable is actually a word. So it needs to be doable. We have to be able to look at it at the end of the day and say, in human resources, in technology, in finance and budget, in academic services, communications, that we can actually do this work, and we can start moving towards our goals. So I'm excited about next steps for us. What I encourage you guys to do in the last couple hours to lean in, listen to the conversations, and now when you think about those big priority areas, what are some of your ideas? Along with, remember, I wanted you to think about your cyclical lists from Monday, and you have Outlearning the Wolves to finish. It's a cartoon book. It's very easy for them. So just keep those things in mind, and we'll engage in those conversations beginning on Monday. But in between, we still have a week. So if there's questions, concerns, things you want to update, or things that you think we missed, by all means, myself, Ken, Michael, we're all receptors to that feedback and additional information. So thank you very much. And to my board, thank you. This is amazing work, and it's the right work that we need to be working on to create a better future for our children.
Thanks.
I just want to thank all y'all for coming today, sitting in. Much more exciting for us. No, but by the way, I believe there is a word doable.
Okay.
And we're looking forward to
Wasn't
all the
100%
doables that y'all will be doing to present to us, and that'll be good. See the rest of y'all tonight. I think we'll just adjourn this meeting now.
Okay.
2:54.
Okay. 2:54, we got 6 more minutes. Oh, come on, Irma.
6 minutes in your life.